Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Thank you for listening to Your Working Life, my podcast series featuring thought leaders in the career and personal growth arena. You spend a significant portion of your life at work, so my goal is to provide you with tools, inspiration, and resources so you can enjoy your career and love your life. And I am delighted to welcome my very special guest to the show today, Sam Bacharach. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Hey, I'm really excited to dive into a juicy conversation about your book. Let me tell our global listening audience a little bit more about you. Sam Bacharach authored The Agenda Mover, When Your Good Idea Is Not Enough. He's also the co-founder of the Bacharach Leadership Group, which focuses on training leaders in the skills of the agenda mover. And he is the McKelvey Grant Professor at Cornell University. So Sam, welcome. I've got your book in my hands. It is fantastic, and it's called The Agenda Mover. And in it, you write that the true test of leadership is getting things done, moving the needle, as it were. So tell us, how did you decide to write this book? What was the precipitatory action to write the book?
Well, I think it's a theme that's followed throughout my sort of applied and academic career. But I also think that, to me, it was a part of a personal narrative. I mean, we live in a world in which we celebrate the superhero. We go out of our way to talk about charisma. We have this grandiose notion of what leadership is all about. And, and when we look at it, finally it's become very clear that to most of us, we all know what leadership is about. It's about the individual that actually can move ideas through an organization. It's about the individual who can get stuff really actually done, sometimes not because of who they are, but sometimes in spite of who they are, sometimes in spite of obstacles, biases, whatever. Leadership in this society is, for most of us, about executing. It is about getting results. It's about having the skills to move agendas, not because of simply our personality, not because of how we look, but simply because we achieve a level of competence to execute. So I realized the more and more I looked at leadership books, it's always about these grandiose type of things that, I'll never quite be that charismatic, all-inspiring person. We have to train people and give people the micro skills they need to move agendas and get beyond simply issues of personality, charisma, and vision. So that's the nuts and bolts of being a pragmatic leader, is what my concern was about.
Well, and I applaud you because I know there are so many visionaries out there. And, at a certain point, you have to step away from the whiteboard and stop ideating and start doing. However, the vision and charisma factor do play with some leaders. So are they essential leadership characteristics or not? Can we just discard them?
I think what you said is very important. They do play for some.
Yeah.
Notice you said some, not all.
Good
some.
point.
And are the exceptions that people that are, but let's face it, if we look at some of these notions of some leaders, first of all, some of these notions of charisma, for example, are so wrapped up in biases. Let's go and do an exercise. If I do an exercise and ask people who are charismatic leaders and what's leader is charismatic, I'm going to disproportionately get a whole slew of male answers to this type of thing. The point is, some of our notions of leadership focus away from execution. You need vision, and that is not sufficient. In the final analysis, what we really need and what we should be rewarding is execution. We're overly focused on these other things. It's easier if you got charisma. It's easier. It's much easier, of course. But the point is, we shouldn't exclude people. We should be giving people the skills to execute. We have to democratize leadership. That's all of us. We've got to have all those skills. Moving our careers, moving and everything. We can't just rely on our charm, personality. Someone once said, I think it was Edison, vision without execution is hallucination.
Exactly.
So my whole point is, let's get down to the nuts and bolts of pragmatic leadership.
Now, you have created a process that you outline very beautifully in The Agenda Mover. Tell us a little bit about that. And Sam, can anyone utilize this process?
First of all, there's also a magic to the process. And second of all, Absolutely. I mean, my whole notion is that the skills that we need, in moving an agenda is simple and very straightforward. And let's take a step back. If you're out there and you have a great idea, whether you're working in an organization or whether you're pursuing your career, you have an idea how to get from one place to another. Most of us don't lack for great ideas. We always talk about, people always lament, what we need is more creative thinking. Well, look around us, folks. We've got enough, we have tons of creative thinking, but we need an ability to move ideas forward. I may have a career aspiration or where I want to go, but how do I actually move it? And my argument is that in this society, yes, you need hard work and you need that, but you also need to have a degree of political competence.
Yeah.
You also need to know how to win people over. Now, when I say to your listeners, political competence, they go, and God knows that all around the world we've got the word political all over the place these days. The point is, you go, I'm not political. But we all are. But when I look at political, it's a small p. It's your capacity to win people over, and to move along together with them. We are all engaging in politics, a small p. So the process that I outline, which I'll be glad to get into, has to do with how do you use micro political skills to move your individual or collective agenda.
And I have to say, Sam, as a career coach, I applaud you because that small p in political is relevant to every organization, corporate, nonprofit, the government sector, the arts. I mean, you name it. So thank you. It's really important for us to be aware of that.
And we tend, it's relevant to all of us as individuals.
Yes.
I have this little exercise that may be a little ridiculous when I talk about it. Sometimes I live in Manhattan disproportionately. Sometimes I take a group of people, young people, to the moment, get them out of art, and I stand them in front of Jackson Pollock's work, those scrolling paintings, or in front of some abstract notion, and I say to them, how did they get in here? And always they say, their talent? Yeah, their talent gets you to the point, but these people also had the political competence to move their career and to move their ideas in organization and in our career. And that's what this book is about, giving you those skills. And in organizations, by the way, we spend so much time training people in everything but this skill.
Yeah.
And we put in the closet sort of, let's just not talk about it. So this whole notion is to give people those political and the process is, as you said, relatively simple. I'd be glad to go into it.
Yeah, let's take that a step farther because you've really identified 4 stages of implementing a campaign to turn ideas into reality, which is really what we're getting at here. And you identify anticipate, mobilize, negotiate, and sustain. So unpack that for me.
All right, let's think about it. First of all, in any situation, I ask your listeners to think of themselves as leading a campaign. A campaign in an organization for a new idea, a campaign on behalf of their own career, a proactive campaign that they're actually managing. Now, and I understand that word campaign, but it's something you're trying to move. And in that sense, that campaign has a couple of steps to it. First of all, I assume that I have a great idea, okay? And that idea may be I want to implement, and we spent a lot of time training people in major corporations. So now we're about to a lot of engineers. They know what their new ideas they want in organizations. How do I move it forward? How do I move it? So the first, how do I move my career idea? The idea of getting, that becomes this. So the first step is to anticipate the agendas of others. Know where other people are coming from. Now, I know how mundane that sounds, but if you really begin to do your homework around this, it becomes very thorough and very important. That means mapping the stakeholders, understanding the strategies that other people are following. For example, you're up against someone and you're presenting an idea to them. Well, this person has sort of a tinkering mindset that they'll say, hey, everything is all right, we'll move change, or they can be like overhaulers. My whole point is that you have to anticipate where people are deeply coming from. You also have to anticipate the arguments that people make. People will always make these arguments and challenge you, but you know what? No one ever comes out and says to you bluntly, you're wrong. They don't come out and say to you, you're doing it all wrong, and say, oh, you're wrong, this is a stupid idea. They play this little yes, but game. So did you do the homework? Did you anticipate the type of arguments that are going to be challenging you? The yes, but argument. So that becomes notions. And once you've done all that, once you've anticipated what people are coming from, do you have the skills to actually mobilize them? The actually skills to mobilize them. Can you focus your message? Do you know how to justify your arguments? You want them to hire you. You want them to move a new idea because your division wants it. Do you know how to justify your agenda? Do you tell them, look at the numbers? Do you tell them, look what other people are doing? So do you know how to justify things? Do you understand the idea of establishing credibility? So that becomes the second part. Those are the skills of mobilization.
Sam, you've done such a great job really articulating these 4 stages of anticipate, mobilize, negotiate, and sustain. Bring it home with negotiate and sustain. And I want to prompt you with a bit of a question. Sometimes it takes a little extra something to get those who are on the fence to really see your side. So how do you negotiate with them?
All right, here's my first, as we just said, you've anticipated where people are coming from. You've got their initial support. But now what you really want is their buy-in. As you say, they're not against you, but they're sitting on the fence.
Yeah.
They're not quite moving with your agenda. They're sitting on the fence. So now you really got to get them in, right? So everyone can give you initial support. How do you actually get the buy-in, first of all? First, one thing is, what most of the time gets people to creates hesitation? You're not focusing on their anxiety.
Okay.
First, I want you to focus on their anxiety. And there's specific things. You want them to join your effort. You want them to hire you. You want them to support you. They're going to be afraid that maybe this whole thing will fail. So address the fear of failure. Address the fear of the new. Address their paranoia about turf and what they'll be losing. I want you to focus on their anxiety. So that's number one. Second, I want you to focus on what's in it for them. That's not a Machiavellian issue. If someone's going to support your agenda, they want to know that there's something beneficial to them or their group or their effort. So what is actually in it for them? And then there's this whole notion of where will you be if the whole thing actually fails? Will you take responsibility for it? And so there are a whole bunch of things that we should be doing in negotiating and in pulling people in. And we discuss that in the agenda movement. When we train people, we focus on these type of micro skills. But again, they're not going to join you just because they've given you initial support. As you said, you've got to get the buy-in. You've got to get them out there. You got to get them to make sure that they actually are giving you fundamental basic support to go the distance. Now, once you've got that, you can sit back on your laurels. But you know what happens most of the time in organizations? You've gotten the buy-in, but you drop the ball.
Yeah.
You forget that you have to go the distance, that you forget that you've got to keep the focus. Sometimes people will become discouraged. You've got to go back to it. You've got to revisit. You have to examine your intention. So the 4th step for me is not dropping the ball, but going the distance and getting things done. In any setting, in any organizational setting, that's what creating results and creating change, leading for results and creating change is all about. It's about your capacity to mobilize people, anticipate where they're coming from, get the buy-in, and go the distance. That's what it means to lead through a campaign.
So let me take that a step further, Sam. This is fascinating. So I understand getting the buy-in. And you also speak in the book about establishing credibility. Is that similar, or does that take it a step farther?
I think establishing the credibility is something you do quite early in getting initial support. But I think one of the things that we can think about for a moment is the difference between establishing your credibility or the credibility of your ideas.
Yeah.
And I think that's something to keep in mind. So actually, if we were going to dissect the elections in the United States, it would be an interesting exercise.
It would.
The point is, here's an interesting issue. In this recent campaign, we saw that a lot of people question the credibility of the Republican candidate, and they question the credibility of the Democratic Party candidate. But what happened is, in the final analysis, they voted for the Republican candidate, and you take a look at it, somehow the ideas had more credibility than the individuals. The ideas carried the day. So here's a question for you all to think about. You may have great credibility, and that's one thing, but you also have to establish the credibility of your ideas. It's two times we confuse this. And there are ways of doing this. But how do you do it? What do you say? Oh, my ideas are credible. You have to actually think of the language of credibility. Establish a specific language of credibility that shows them you know what you're talking about, that you know where that you can be trusted. You actually you have the sense of the market. You have to establish a language by which you can become credible. And that's very difficult. It's hard to say to someone, I'm credible, or my ideas are credible, without being an egomaniac.
So let's take that a step further, because you identified, for example, Steve Jobs and Martin Luther King Jr. as expert agenda movers.
Right.
So we get their credibility. I'm going to take a leap here and say that most people would agree about the credibility. But what made them such expert agenda movers with those two historical figures?
I think number one, and let's deal with the difficult one first, and that actually is Steve Jobs. We take a look and we have this sort of mixed notion of what Jobs was about. One the new image now is this sort of eccentric but tough, ruthless leader, etc. But if you take a look at, especially when Jobs comes back to Apple, you begin to realize that as strong as the vision he had, he knew that he needed to win the critical people to his side. That's the mistake he made in the first part of his career, and why he didn't quite catch it at Apple. But afterwards, he began to realize, although he had a rough edges to it, that he needed to create the appropriate coalitions to move his agenda in the organization. He had to mobilize the right people, convince the right people. The idea that everyone just jumped because Jobs said jump isn't really quite happen there. He needed to mobilize people. Let's take a look at Martin Luther King. We often think of Martin Luther King as a grand visionary, but in a charismatic figure, and that is absolutely what he was. But Martin Luther King's genius was in his capacity to execute, his capacity to mobilize coalitions, his capacity to negotiate with President Johnson at the time, his capacity to win people over, his capacity to go the distance, to sustain the momentum that he needed to do. Martin Luther King was a brilliant leader because of these micro-political skills. He was a visionary, charismatic, no doubt. But what made Martin Luther King remarkable, and what made him so unique, is his capacity to sustain the momentum, to create coalitions. How many hours a day can you give charismatic speeches? The rest of the day, you're spending your time, or he spent his time, thinking, who do I need on our corner? What do we need to get done? It was the nuts and bolts of execution. And he was brilliant when it came to political competence.
Excellent. Well, on that note, Sam Bacharach, I thank you so much for being on the show. Your book is extraordinary. The Agenda Mover, When Your Good Idea is Not Enough. Sam, tell us how we can follow you in the social media world or on your website, and how can we buy this book?
Well, you can follow me in my Twitter account always, but more importantly at blg-lead.com, blg-lead.com. And you can buy the book online in Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc. And I'd be glad to hear from anyone.
Brilliant. Sam, what a joy to have you on the show. I wish you continued success. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and expertise. And I would agree, it's time to take those good ideas and put them into practice.
For all of us. Thank you very much.
Sam, be well. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in to Your Working Life, where my goal is to help you design your career destiny so it doesn't happen by default. Career and life satisfaction is possible, and it's time to embrace what you love doing so you can do more of it. The show is now available on iTunes, YouTube, Podbean, and Stitcher. I'm Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Take good care.